Good day. I'm Dr. Melinda Vencio and I will be lecturing the topic on cardiomyopathy and myocarditis. The outline of my lecture is divided into two. We will discuss the three different types of cardiomyopathies, such as the dilated, restrictive, and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The second part will be the different types of myocarditis based on etiology. So cardiomyopathy estimates around 5 to 10% of the 5 to 6 million patients already diagnosed with heart failure in the United States. So cardiomyopathy is defined as a heterogeneous group of diseases of the myocardium which is associated with mechanical and or electrical dysfunction that usually exhibit inappropriate ventricular hypertrophy or dilatation and is due to a variety of causes that frequently genetic. The term cardiomyopathy intended to exclude cardiac dysfunction that result from other structural heart disease such as coronary artery disease, primary valve disorders, and severe hypertension. It presents from inadequate cardiac reserve during exercise. This will present as exertional intolerance associated with breathlessness and fatigue. It may also present as fluid retention or an atrioventricular valve regurgitation, such as the mitral regurgitation and tricuspid regurgitation, secondary to dilatation of the annulus. It could also present as chest pain, atrial and ventricular tachyarrhythmias, and can cause embolic events. These symptoms may initially go unnoticed or attributed to other causes such as pulmonary, peripheral edema may not appear despite severe fluid retention. So dilated cardiomyopathy, this image on the right shows the markedly enlarged left ventricular cavity. Decreased systolic function is measured by echocardiography as a depressed left ventricular ejection fraction. Systolic failure is more marked than the frequently accompanying diastolic failure. Some myocytes die during the initial injury while the others survive only to have later apoptosis. So 1/3 of the causes may be familial, while the remaining 2/3 are acquired, secondary to infection or exposure to toxic chemicals. So the pathophysiology of dilated cardiomyopathy begins with exposure to toxin or viral infection as the inciting event. This will now cause injury to the myocytes, which will cause death of some myocytes, while other myocytes will compensate by hypertrophy to accommodate the increased burden of wall stress. While local and circulating factors stimulate deleterious response to contribute to the progression of the disease even in the absence of further primary injury. Dynamic remodeling affects diastolic function and the amount of ventricular dilatation. Mitral regurgitation commonly develops as the valvular apparatus becomes distorted. So there is secondary mitral regurgitation. This is a schematic diagram demonstrating the possible progression from infection through direct, secondary, and autoimmune responses to dilated cardiomyopathy. Most of the supporting evidence for this sequence is derived from animal models. It is not known to what degree of persistent infection and or ongoing immune responses contribute to ongoing myocardial injury in the chronic phase. So from the stage of viremia, during the infectious stage, it will progress into a persistent or latent infection and eventually to chronic dilated cardiomyopathy. So this table summarizes the causes of dilated cardiomyopathy, which is divided mainly into infectious causes and non-infectious causes, toxic agents, metabolic and genetic diseases. So toxic agents like alcohol, catecholamines like amphetamines and cocaine, and the use of chemotherapeutic agents can lead to the development of dilated cardiomyopathy. Miscellaneous causes are also mentioned in this table, which includes arrhythmogenic right ventricular dysplasia, but will not only affect the right ventricle, but it can also affect the left ventricle as well. LV non-compaction, wherein there is abnormal trabeculation in the left ventricular wall, and peripartum cardiomyopathy or cardiomyopathy that is associated with pregnancy. So the common cause of dilated cardiomyopathy is secondary to infection of the myocardium or myocarditis. It could also be caused by toxic environmental and pharmacologic agents such as alcohol, which is the most common toxin. Excess consumption of alcohol may contribute 10% of cases of heart failure. Toxicity attributed to both the alcohol and to its primary metabolite, which is aldehyde. Polymorphism of the genes encoding alcohol dehydrogenase and the enzyme angiotensin converting enzyme. So estimated 6 drinks daily for 5 to 10 years, or that is equivalent to 4 ounces of pure ethanol, can cause alcohol cardiomyopathy, but frequent binge drinking can also be sufficient. Cardiac impairment is the sum of permanent damage and substantial component that is reversible after cessation of alcohol consumption. Pathology reveals tiny microinfarct consistent with small vessel ischemia. So, catecholamine agents such as cocaine and amphetamines can also cause dilated cardiomyopathy. Chemotherapy are most common drugs implicated as a cause of dilated cardiomyopathy, and this includes anthracyclines that causes characteristic histologic changes of vascular degeneration and myofibrillar loss, generation, and disruption of the large titin contribute to loss of sarcomere organization. This will now cause acute heart failure during administration of a single dose, which can be severe but can resolve clinically after a few weeks. Doxorubicin cardiotoxicity develops in 3% of patients, and it may be rapidly progressive but may also improve to restore reasonable ventricular function. Those patients who receive doxorubicin while still growing may have inadequate development of heart to support cardiac function into the early 20s. Later, after adult, patient may develop gradual onset of symptoms or an acute precipitated by a reversible insult such as atrial fibrillation. Trastuzumab, which is a monoclonal antibody that interferes with cell surface receptors, is crucial for some tumor growth and for cardiac adaptation. Although the incidence of cardiomyopathy with trastuzumab is much lower than anthracycline, but if cardiotoxicity ensues, it does not always resolve. Cyclophosphamide and ifosfamide can cause acute heart failure associated with very high dosages. Metabolic diseases such as hyperthyroidism and hypothyroidism can also cause, but do not often cause clinical heart failure, but it only exacerbates the heart failure itself, exacerbating tachyarrhythmias due to the derangement of electrolytes like calcium, phosphate, and magnesium. Pheochromocytoma is a rare catecholamine-secreting tumor which is derived from the chromaffin cells. Nutritional deficiencies such as beriberi is a deficiency in vitamin B1 or thiamine. And hemochromatosis, which is a condition wherein there is iron overload, which is usually genetic. So this can all cause dilated cardiomyopathy. Familial dilated cardiomyopathy, this is most recognizable familial syndrome, which are your muscular dystrophies. So arrhythmogenic ventricular dysplasia is prominent in those with family history of sudden death or ventricular tachycardia even before the clinical cardiomyopathy. This will now suggest genetic defects in the desmosomal proteins. Defects in these proteins of the desmosomal complex disrupt myocyte junctions and adhesions, which lead to the replacement of myocardium by deposition of fat. So the next is Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, or also known as the apical ballooning syndrome or stress-induced cardiomyopathy. This occurs typically in older women after sudden emotional or physical stress. There is global ventricular dilatation and hypokinesia of the mid to apical segments of the left ventricle in the absence of coronary artery stenosis. So the basal segment is spared. This will now forms the shape of a narrow neck jar as seen in the picture, which is known as Takotsubo in Japan. It presents as pulmonary edema, hypotension, and chest pain with ECG changes mimicking an acute myocardial infarction. While idiopathic cardiomyopathy is diagnosed by exclusion, this accounts for 2/3 of dilated cardiomyopathies. Let's now move on to restrictive cardiomyopathy, which is the least common of all the cardiomyopathies. This is a myocardial disorder that usually results from increased myocardial stiffness that leads to impaired ventricular filling. This is characterized by a non-dilated left or right ventricle with diastolic dysfunction. Both the left and right atria are enlarged with elevated and diastolic pressure. There is modest left ventricular dilatation with an end diastolic dimension less than 6 centimeters. So the first symptom is usually exercise intolerance, and right-sided symptoms are evident on the early stage. The cardiac impulse is less displaced and less dynamic. A fourth heart sound is more common than the third heart sound. And the JVP shows rapid Y descent and may increase during inspiration. So the restrictive cardiomyopathies are a heterogeneous group of myocardial diseases that vary according to etiology, pathogenesis, clinical presentation, diagnostic evaluation and criteria, treatment, and prognosis. Restrictive cardiomyopathy may result from inherited or acquired predispositions and disease. Restrictive cardiomyopathy is broadly classified as infiltrative, storage disease, and endomyocardial. Most are due to infiltration of abnormal substance between the myocyte storage of abnormal metabolic products within the myocytes, storage of abnormal metabolic products within myocytes, or fibrotic injury. So hypertrophic cardiomyopathy is the last type of cardiomyopathy that we are going to discuss. This is a genetic cardiovascular disease, and as you can see on the picture, as compared to a normal heart, it is defined by an increase in the left ventricular wall thickness that is not solely explained by any abnormal loading condition. It is a recognizable autosomal dominant pattern that is best characterized as a genetic cardiomyopathy. This disorder is caused by a mutation in cardiac sarcomere protein gene, and more than 80% of the mutation in the beta-myosin heavy chain, cardiac myosin binding protein C, or cardiac troponin T. So it is characterized by a marked left ventricular hypertrophy in the absence of other causes such as hypertension and valvular heart disease. So the systolic function as measured by 2D echo, the ejection fraction is often supranormal. Hypertrophy may be asymmetric, involving the septum more than the free wall of the ventricle. So this is known as the asymmetric septal hypertrophy, or ASH. The prevalence of HCM is 1 to 5,000 adults and characterized hemodynamically by diastolic dysfunction, which is originally attributed to the hypertrophy, fibrosis, and intraventricular gradient when present. There is also systolic anterior motion of the anterior mitral valve, which causes the mitral regurgitation. It presents clinically between 20 to 40 years old, and the most common presenting symptom is dyspnea on exertion, which reflects elevated intracardiac filling pressures. Chest pain with either an atypical or typical exertional pattern occurs in more than half of symptomatic patients, and this is attributed to myocardial ischemia from high demand and an abnormal intramural coronary arteries in the hypertrophied myocardium that causes subendocardial ischemia. Palpitations may result from atrial fibrillation or ventricular arrhythmias. Sudden cardiac death is the most devastating presenting manifestation. So on physical examination, a harsh murmur arising from both the outflow tract, so in the left lower sternal border, this is due to the turbulence during ventricular ejection and the commonly associated mitral regurgitation. So the gradient and the murmur may be enhanced by maneuvers that will decrease ventricular volume, such as the Valsalva maneuver or standing after squatting. It may be decreased by increasing ventricular volume or vascular resistance, such as squatting or hand grip exercises. A fourth heart sound can be heard and is commonly due to decreased ventricular compliance. Palpation of the carotid pulse may reveal a bifid systolic impulse from early and delayed ejection. There will also be volume overload secondary to systemic fluid retention. For the management, it is directed to symptomatic treatment and the prevention of sudden death. It is not known whether treatment will decrease disease progression in asymptomatic family members. So, beta blockers such as your metoprolol, carvedilol, bisoprolol, and other beta blockers, as well as the calcium antagonist verapamil, are the most commonly used initial therapy that are used to decrease heart rate and increase the length of time for diastolic feeling, as well as to decrease the inotropic state. Diuretics are indicated if there is volume overload or when symptoms persist and an outflow gradient is present, an addition of disopyramide is sometimes effective. Anticoagulation is recommended to prevent embolic events for patients who have atrial fibrillation. And amiodarone can also improve symptoms but is usually initiated for control of arrhythmias rather than symptoms. So in summary, this table compares the three types of cardiomyopathy based on the echocardiographic features and clinical manifestations. It is notable that dilated cardiomyopathy will have a dilated left ventricle and a decreased wall thickness on 2D echo with a severely depressed ejection fraction and dilated atria. Mitral regurgitation appears earlier than tricuspid regurgitation and is secondary to annular dilatation. This will present clinically as exertional dyspnea and left-sided congestive heart failure symptoms before the right-sided symptoms. For restrictive cardiomyopathy, ejection fraction is variable, ranging from around 25 to 50%, with normal or increased left ventricular wall thickness. The primary problem is the stiff ventricular wall that is causing the diastolic dysfunction. Right-sided symptoms often dominates the clinical picture. While for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, the left ventricular cavity is small and obliterated with a markedly hypertrophied septum. Mitral regurgitation is secondary to the valve-septum interaction, secondary to the systolic anterior motion of the mitral valve, and it will present initially with exertional dyspnea or fatal in sudden cardiac death. Let's move on to the second part of my lecture, which is myocarditis. So myocarditis may be a precursor to idiopathic dilated cardiomyopathy. It refers to the inflammation, necrosis, or myocytolysis of myocardial cells. If you will compare the myocytes in a normal myocardium on top of the picture, and at the bottom is the myocyte in patients with myocarditis or inflamed myocardium. So most commonly attributed to infectious organisms that can directly invade the myocardium or produce cardiotoxins and trigger chronic inflammatory response. Myocarditis can be secondary to infectious causes such as your viral myocarditis, parasitic myocarditis, bacterial infections, and other infections caused by spirochetes, fungal, and rickettsial infections. So the pathophysiology is after viruses enter the circulation through the respiratory or gastrointestinal tract, they can infect other organs possessing specific receptors. So these will now cause viral invasion and replication that will lead to myocardial injury and lysis. So viral invasion and replication, after which will cause the viral proteases to have multiple actions, of which one is to degrade the protein dystrophin in the myocyte membrane complex that is genetically abnormal in some muscular dystrophies. Viral antigens activate immune responses that help to contain the initial infection but may persist into later phases. So these are the viruses that commonly causes viral myocarditis. It presents clinically in a young adult with progressive dyspnea and weakness over a few days to weeks after a recent viral infection. So these will also present as ventricular tachyarrhythmias, which may dominate the presentation in a patient with viral myocarditis. But this patient should also be evaluated for sarcoidosis or giant cell myocarditis. So it presents with progressive dyspnea and weakness, chest pain, and tachyarrhythmias after the viral prodrome. So for acute fulminant myocarditis, there should be rapid progression from severe febrile respiratory syndrome to cardiogenic shock from multiple organ system failure. There should be an aggressive support with use of inotropic agents, and more than half with acute presentation survive with marked improvement within the first few weeks, often returning to near normal systolic function. Heart failure from other cause worsen due to myocardial depressant effects of the cytokines. If there is marked left ventricular dilatation and presence of severe edema, this suggests a chronic, slowly progressive state which supported by a history of gradual change in exercise intolerance before the viral syndrome. So the diagnosis of viral myocarditis is confirmed by echocardiography, especially so if it produces cardiomyopathy. And this will further, the evaluation is further directed to ascertain whether myocarditis is present. Troponin is often mildly elevated, and creatinine kinase may be released from the cardiac injury or skeletal muscle involvement. Cardiac magnetic resonance imaging is increasingly used for the diagnosis of myocarditis, which is supported by evidence of increased tissue edema and gadolinium enhancement, particularly in the midwall, distinct from the usual coronary artery territories. An endomyocardial biopsy is warranted, so this will now show lymphocytic infiltration with evidence of myocyte necrosis. But this is rarely done nowadays. So fulminant myocarditis is characterized by a marked tissue edema without a cellular infiltrate. The management of viral myocarditis is by stabilizing the hemodynamic status and then toward adjusting the neurohormonal antagonist for the treatment of heart failure. So for patients with subacute presentation, randomized trials have shown that there is no benefit of immunosuppression with the use of glucocorticoid combinations or IVIG, or intravenous immunoglobulin, even when the biopsy is positive for hemo or for lymphocytic infiltrates. So for the prognosis, it resolves spontaneously while others progress to cardiomyopathy without other obvious cause. Almost half will have major improvement in left ventricular ejection fraction during the subsequent 6 to 12 months. Next is parasitic myocarditis. So Chagas disease, so it is caused by the protozoan Trypanosoma cruzi, which is the most common cause of cardiomyopathy. The parasite itself can cause myocyte lysis and primary neuronal damage. And specific immune responses may recognize the parasites or related antigens and lead to chronic immune activation in the absence of detectable parasites. An additional factor in progression of Chagas disease is the autonomic dysfunction and microvascular damage that may contribute to cardiac and gastrointestinal disease, conduction system abnormalities, particularly the sinoatrial node and the atrioventricular node dysfunction, as well as the right bundle branch block. So it can present in the acute phase, which is unrecognized, with non-specific symptoms, or occasionally with acute myocarditis and meningoencephalitis, or a silent stage but progresses slowly over 10 to 30 years. This manifests in the cardiac and gastrointestinal system in the chronic stages. So, conduction system abnormalities is very common. AV node dysfunction as well as sinus node dysfunction. There is also right bundle branch block, atrial fibrillation, and ventricular tachyarrhythmias also occur. Small ventricular aneurysms are common, particularly in the LV apex. Treatment of the advanced stages focused on the clinical manifestation of the disease, with heart failure regimens, pacemaker and defibrillators, and use of anticoagulation. So next is the African trypanosomiasis infection, which results from the tsetse fly bite and can occur in travelers exposed during trips to Africa. So it has a West African form, which is caused by the Trypanosoma brucei gambiense and progresses silently over years, while the East African form is caused by your Trypanosoma brucei rhodesiense, can progress rapidly through perivascular infiltration to myocarditis and heart failure with frequent arrhythmias. So the diagnosis is made by identification of the trypanosomes in the blood, lymph nodes, or other affected sites. Development of optimal drug regimens remains limited and depends on the type and the stage, either hemolymphatic or neurologic. Next is toxoplasmosis, which is contracted through undercooked infected beef or pork and transmission from feline feces or from cats, organ transplantation, transfusion, or via maternal fetal transmission. Immunocompromised hosts are at greatest risk for reactivation of latent infection from cyst. The cysts have been found in up to 40% of autopsies of patients dying from HIV infection. So toxoplasmosis may present with encephalitis, chorioretinitis, and in the heart, it can cause myocarditis, pericardial effusion, constrictive pericarditis, and heart failure. The diagnosis may be suspected in the immunocompromised patient with myocarditis and serologic evidence of toxoplasmosis. Sampling may reveal the cyst in the myocardium, and treatment is a combination therapy which includes the use of pyrimethamine and sulfadiazine or clindamycin. Next is trichinellosis. This is caused by Trichinella spiralis larva ingested with undercooked meat. Larvae migrating into skeletal muscles cause myalgias, weakness, and fever. There may be periorbital and facial edema and conjunctival and retinal hemorrhage. Although the larva may occasionally invade the myocardium, clinical heart failure is rare, and when it is observed, this is attributed to the eosinophilic inflammatory response. The diagnosis of trichonellosis is made from the specific serum antibody and is further supported by the presence of eosinophilia. Treatment includes use of antihelminthic drugs and glucocorticoids if inflammation is severe. Let's now proceed to bacterial infection as a cause of myocarditis. So more common, it is due to depressed global contraction in severe infection and sepsis through systemic inflammatory response, while a secondary to a direct bacterial invasion and abscess formation is a rare cause of myocarditis. First cause is diphtheria. This specifically affects the heart, and the most common cause of death in patients with diphtheria is due to myocarditis. So this is due to a release of a toxin that impairs protein synthesis and may particularly affect the conduction system. Other systemic bacterial infections associated with myocarditis are the following: brucellosis, chlamydophila, legionella, meningococcus, mycoplasma, psittacosis, and salmonellosis. So another bacterial infection is secondary to Clostridium, which cause myocardial damage from the released toxin. Gas bubbles can be detected in the myocardium, and occasionally abscesses can form in the myocardium and pericardium. Next is streptococcal infection with beta hemolytic streptococci, which is most commonly associated with acute rheumatic fever and is characterized by the inflammation and fibrosis of cardiac valves, causing stenosis and or regurgitation, as well as systemic connective tissue involvement manifesting as migratory polyarthritis, but can also lead to myocarditis with focal or diffuse infiltrates of mononuclear cells. Tuberculosis is also a bacterial infection that can cause myocarditis directly as well as through tuberculous pericarditis, but rarely does so when the disease is treated with antibiotics. So Whipple's disease is caused by Troperima whipplei. The usual manifestations are in the GI tract, but pericarditis, coronary arteritis, valvular lesions, and occasionally clinical heart failure may also occur. Multi-drug anti-tuberculous regimens are effective, but the disease tends to relapse even with appropriate treatment. Next is spirochetal myocarditis, which has been diagnosed from myocardial biopsies containing Borrelia burgdorferi that causes Lyme disease. Lyme carditis most often presents with arthritis and conduction system disease that resolves within 1 to 2 weeks of antibiotic treatment, which only rarely causing clinical heart failure. Next is fungal myocarditis, which can occur due to hematogenous or direct spread of infection from other sites, as has been described for aspergillosis, actinomycosis, blastomycosis, candidiasis, coccidiomycosis, cryptococcosis, histoplasmosis, and mucormycosis. However, cardiac infection is rarely the dominant clinical feature of these infections. Rickettsial infections such as Q fever, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and scrub typhus are frequently accompanied by ECG changes, but most clinical manifestations relate to systemic vascular involvement. Non-infectious causes of myocardial inflammation can occur without apparent preceding infection. And these could be myocardial depression can develop and reverse quickly. Then non-cellular mediators such as antibodies and cytokines play a major role in addition to lymphocytes, and that myocardial antigens are exposed by prior physical injury and viral infection. So sarcoidosis, cardiac transplantation rejection are some of the non-infectious cause. So granulomatous myocarditis or sarcoidosis causes a rapid onset heart failure and ventricular tachyarrhythmias. Conduction block, chest pain syndromes, or minor cardiac findings in the setting of ocular involvement. An infiltrative skin rash or a non-specific febrile illness. While giant cell myocarditis may present as a rapidly progressive heart failure and tachyarrhythmias. Diffuse granulomatous lesions are surrounded by extensive inflammatory infiltrate. Associated conditions are thymomas, thyroiditis, pernicious anemia, and other autoimmune diseases, and occasionally recent infection. While in hypersensitivity myocarditis, biopsy reveals infiltration with lymphocytes and mononuclear cells with a high proportion of eosinophils. Use of high-dose glucocorticoids can be curative for hypersensitivity myocarditis. Prognosis of myocarditis. For those with mild symptoms, they have a better prognosis and complete resolution, while patients who have progressed to chronic myocarditis will eventually present with dilated cardiomyopathy. So that will be my last slide. Thank you for listening.